Here we go. You know, it is time for our featured guest, and I want to share a little bit about Stan Slap. He came to my attention for the first time because of his keynote at New Media Expo, or Blog World, as most of you remember it before its name change. And Stan, man, what he is doing is frankly one of the goals I have for my own business and brand. He has an international consulting company that uses what I would describe as very provocative techniques that serve as brain pattern interrupts. You know, we talk about that a lot here on Breakthrough Business Strategies Radio. And then it gives you powerful ways to deliver what it looks like to be very revolutionary, improved performances with large groups of people. That is not an easy thing to accomplish. Stan's been able to create what looks like a creature of culture willingness. How many of you can hold your hands up today and say, I do a good job of creating cultural willingness? Willingness, oh my gosh. You know, I remember when I worked in bigger organizations, that was probably the toughest thing to do, to get people to be willing to do something. It seems like that was just a constant battle. Oh, yes, it still makes me kind of gird to this day. And so what I notice is when you can get on that page, then what happens is people's behaviors change. And when their behaviors change, then you're able to manifest really explosive growth, whether it's for your business, your teams. This is going to be one heck of a conversation today, guys. I'm telling you. Let's dig into how we can benefit from what Stan is going to share with us today, and then you can follow up by going deeper into this material in his book. So please join me as we welcome Stan Slap.
Hi, Michele.
Hey, Stan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Good. How are you?
I am enjoying today. It's not one of those really sun-pounding, heat-sweating days. I'm one of the weird people who live in Houston that loves when we, once in a while, have cooler weather.
Wow. Well, I'm a California boy. If the umbrella is bent in my drink, it's a bad day.
You know, one of the things that I noticed this morning on G Plus was a post that Richard Branson, of course we know someone's probably doing it for him, posted on there, and he said, engage your emotions at work. Your instincts and emotions are there to help you. And I know that this is something that really comes out in your work, in your book as well. Why is it that this message still scares people in the professional world?
Well, I think it starts with a misunderstanding of emotion, period, as some uncontrollable, threatening concept to the enterprise. And the opposite of emotional is not rational. The opposite of emotional is detached. And so if you prohibit emotion in business, you prohibit everything emotion gives you: passion, commitment, discretionary effort. But the organization is an organism too, and like any organism, its first priority is to survive. In order to survive, it believes it needs to be the dominant organism in the relationship with its people. It needs to get you to do what it wants you to do, how and when it wants you to do it. So the idea of setting free your emotions, setting free your ability to live your own values is frightening to the organism, the corporate organism, because it believes if I set you free to pursue your own priorities, prioritize what's most important to you, then you won't prioritize the company. In fact, exactly the opposite is true. The company can't always be the first cause. People's ability to live their own deepest values, practice true fulfillment, also has to be a cause. There's no better way for the company to become a cause than by not always insisting on being the cause.
You know, when I was going through the process that you had in Bury My Heart at Conference Room B, one of the things that really stood out to me, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the show over the past 5 years, is that I'm still having to remind myself, even on a daily basis, to ask questions around my own values. In other words, if there's something I need to make a choice or a decision on, even as much as I'm really conscious of it, sometimes I forget to say, will this keep me aligned to my core one value of integrity? Why does that happen to us?
Well, I think for anybody trying to sell you something, they stand to profit from you not having a strong sense of self. Because if you don't know what's true for you, everyone else has unusual influence. So we are in a relentless seductive fog because really anybody trying to sell you anything, from consumerism, which exists to make you feel small, to sell you something to feel bigger for a little while, to anybody who's got a role for you as a constituent, who has to scare you to present themselves as a safe alternative to your role in a company. All of those organizations, which are bigger than you are and harder working than you are, stand to profit from you not having this strong sense of self. So it is very difficult. We end up prizing a life undiscovered, and that's because there is a lot of very seductive pressure on us. It's difficult to remember what's most important to you, surprisingly difficult, and then you still need the tools. You need the mechanisms for promoting and protecting those things in the environments in which you serve. It should be a natural thing. It's not a natural thing.
Is it not a natural thing because we don't grow up with it being just a bigger part of our environment?
Go ahead.
Well, we can't expect our parents to be like fully evolved beings. They're learning their life lessons too. So where does it come in?
Well, that's the problem. Values are formed pretty early on, and that's that. The way I look at this is if you get your values when you're a little wee beastie and you swallow what you believe is good for you, all families flirt with dysfunctionality, but some like to go all the way. So you're gonna be told what your values should be, and then you get into a world where those things are again under significant pressure to be transformed to other people's values. It is a very difficult thing to even understand the concept of values, to recognize that what values are a source, your own source of safety, hope, and renewal. They're your own definition of what life looks like when you live it exactly the way you want to. And values and morals are not the same thing. Morals are the right thing to do. Values are the right thing for you to do. They may be coincidentally the same as your morals, but they're different things. To have that personal code, to operate with that personal code, to live a life of real intention, to say this is right for me and this is wrong for me, is very, very difficult. Again, you have to have some tools for it, and you have to recognize that you are in these manipulative environments that don't necessarily want you to live those values.
You know, when I'm listening to that, Stan, part of my mind is going, where do we not get so focused on that life is manipulation that we put that wall up and say, well, everything's manipulation, so I'm not going to participate?
Well, yeah, I think you can't do that. Isolation doesn't serve you any better. I think it's just an understanding that there are some bedrock things that are true for me. These are the lessons I've learned about living. Here's what I've learned about living. I don't want to do without the benefits of those lessons in whatever environment I am, and I don't want people who are even nominally close to me to do without the benefits of what I've learned about living as well. You don't have to isolate yourself. You don't even have to be susceptible to new information, new viewpoints of others. You just have to know what's true for you. So, Michele, this is your one and only precious life. Someone is going to decide how it's going to be lived, and that person, it better be you.
You know, one of the things that I found really surfacing as I was reading this book, Stan, was how many times entrepreneurs, and especially startups, ask me questions that really kind of illuminated for me, oh, wow, okay, so the question they're asking me is because they aren't real clear about what their values are. Yet if you try to start having that conversation with them in the moment, you're going to get resistance. So what kind of suggestions can you give us who are in that situation? How do you open that window in their mind so that you can be helpful to them and then everyone can thrive?
How do you connect with somebody about their own values? How do you make them aware of their own values? Is that what you're asking?
Well, if I'm in a conversation, an entrepreneur or startup has come to me and they're asking me questions, and from listening to their questions, I can tell that they aren't conscious of operating or even maybe be totally aware of what their values are, because the questions they're asking me are kind of all over the place. It's showing me that they don't have that rudder in the water to help them make better choices. How can I bring this topic up without them being resistant to it? Because it's like, oh, my God, well, she's questioning my values.
Well, you're not questioning whether they have them. You're just questioning whether they're aware of them. But, yeah, I can understand that would be pretty pejorative. I would say for anybody who's living the entrepreneurial experience, which it easily is as much as entrepreneurial experiences, you have to be born to be able to live that way. It's not for everybody. And I cannot imagine going through the stress of launching your own business without being able to live your own values as a major perk. And I would, first of all, I would question that, not just question whether they have values, but just out of curiosity. Why did you start this business? I mean, there are a lot easier things to do than start and operate your own business. And the companies that are successful as entrepreneurial ventures don't just have a clever idea. They're an extrapolation of personal passions that somebody has. That's why they do it. So just as curiosity about their own business, tell me about your business. If all they come to you is the value proposition of the business, it's a reasonable question to ask. It's an engaging, a curious question to ask. Tell me about the passion that drives your business. When we work with a lot larger companies, and we do, my consulting company, CNN just hired us to redo their entire brand strategy worldwide. We've done this for a lot of large companies. And we still start in the same place. We start by saying, put the business aside. Let's go back to the garage where the best businesses are formed. What as a human being, what is right with the world that must be protected? What do you believe? What is wrong with the world that must be corrected? And can you translate those personal passions into the brand strategy itself so you naturally protect it and promote it? I would say for entrepreneurs, it's the same thing. So, Michele, if you're talking to an entrepreneur that doesn't seem to know their true north, I would say it is a very reasonable question and not insulting in any way to just say, tell me why. I understand what you do. I understand how you do it. But the companies that become brands, the companies that are successful, the companies that navigate through the wild waters of the entrepreneurial stage, they're very good at what they do. They're very good at how they do it, but they're driven by why they do it.
Yes, I'm seeing faces in my mind right now where when I ask the why, I almost cringe when the answer that comes back to me is to make money. I just want to put my hands in my...
Yeah, we tell companies of any size the same thing. The best companies are really they are started. If you go back to the genesis of the best companies, the companies that become brands, those rare companies that become brands, they start with a hardcore worldview by a deranged radical or a group of deranged radicals who says this is what's right with the world and that's okay. This is what's wrong with the world. That's not okay. And regardless of the value proposition, the business, and regardless of the size, the business is conceived of, at least in part, as a delivery vehicle to build a better world. And if you that passion in the early days of an entrepreneurial company, that passion becomes the molten energy that not only kickstarts and drives the business, it protects the business, which is so resource limited because it leverages those almost non-existent resources in the early days in three critical ways. It attracts the best and brightest to come and work with you or to help you because they want to be part of a right and righteous cause. It solves problems that competitors 100 times better resource can't solve because of your maniacal focus of why you're in business. And it convinces customers that you can do what you say you can do even if you can't prove you can do it yet because they're so taken by your faith and resolve to do it or die trying, you're a safer bet than an established alternative. And if your only passion is to make money, the cost of making that money will always prove more expensive and more difficult than it needs to be because your customer is not infatuated with your revenue concerns. But if your business really stands for something, if there's some legitimate human passion, people don't trust companies, they trust people. You'll not only rule the world, people will want you to.
I'm letting that sink in. I have to say, part of the challenge when I get to interview people that I'm totally absorbing your message and the brilliance that you bring to the table is I have to remind myself I can't zone out and just absorb. I have to actively participate.
Well, listen, my fault for trying to jam an entire keynote speech into the response to an interview question.
Oh, no, that's brilliant.
Well, it's the book will help. You know, I put a lot of this in the book and a lot of the process into the book. This is the first of a 3-book series for Penguin. But this book, the first book, Bury My Heart at Conference Room B, is really about how to live your value. It's aimed at managers, which would certainly qualify any entrepreneurial business owner. And it'll work for anybody. But it's really saying in that surreal job of a manager, how in the world do you even understand your own values? And it's not just making the case to your company, using your values to tell a new story of business performance. It's making the case to yourself because most people at work are surprisingly emotionally detached. And if you are emotionally detached from any relationship, your brain believes that's a safe thing to do. You're detached because you don't think it's safe. So if you think it feels funky when your foot falls asleep at work, wait till your heart wakes up. It's a process to come to terms with the bigger risk may be not doing this than doing it. What seems safe may actually lose me more than it gains me. And that's something we probably can't get through in a single or 5 or 10 interview questions, but it is worth getting into, I'll tell you that.
Well, and everyone knew ahead of time that this was going to be a very interesting and deep conversation today and probably was going to push buttons for them. I warned them ahead of time, and that's what they come to expect, though. It's one of the things that they've communicated back to me. They appreciate the fact that we don't give a real shallow soundbite style of interview, and it in turn ends up helping them to have a level of trust with you who's on the show. And it's funny, Stan, how many times I get comments back on, Michele, you're not going to believe. I know it's been a while since this person was on the show, but here's what I've done with what I learned that day. And I went out and bought the book, and, of course, you know, it goes into more detail. And then they'll tell me, which I didn't even know this until someone brought it up, and then I started suggesting it. They said, I went back and listened to the interview again after I read the book and got something totally different out of it.
That's great. I think that what I'm talking about is, I think, very akin to what you're talking about. There's a reason that I'm in business, the reason we do what we do, and the reason that I also wrote the books and I give the speeches and all that. I believe that short of killing somebody, the worst thing one human being can do to another is to make somebody feel small. To say you're not, you can't, you won't ever be, that's homicide of the soul. And I think that the world works. You go to work. You're affected by people who go to work. And if that happens, if you are diminished by business, working in it or buying from it, that experience doesn't stay in business. It leaps the fence. It follows you home. The people that are made to feel small at work or engaging with a company as a customer, well, those same people are partners and they're parents and they're neighbors and they're voters. And so the toxic impact of a lack of humanity in business is incalculable. And that humanity gathers in business, in cultures, and that's why the work we do is all about manager, employee, and customer cultures. Because if we lose humanity in business, we're all doomed. I mean, we've seen some indications of that, but if we save it, company by company, manager by manager, owner by owner, then we've saved ourselves. Now, my personal motto for living is think deep, live shallow. So we can be as shallow as you want in this interview. But when we're talking about this stuff, it's as deep as it gets.
It is, and I find myself wanting to go two directions here, but I'm just going to pick one because I've always done a great job of making sure when people post a question using the hashtag we ask it. So I'm going to put my thought on hold here and go to Daniel is asking, once you sacrifice family and integrity as a company, is the company doomed, and how long does it have?
Daniel, that's a great question. I think a company can appear to be successful even without those kinds of things in play. You just have to measure success against what definition of success and for how long and at what cost. So if you lose family and integrity, you can embed the cost of running a dysfunctional business into the business. You'll just make less money. It'll mean less. You'll have constant attrition. You'll never be a brand because a brand isn't just about creating trust in customers. It's about creating faith. I believe, but I don't know. I believe you when you say that you'll take care of me. So the business is not necessarily doomed, but the business is now on artificial life support. You're going to have to bribe and bluff and bully people to pay attention to you. The greater point is then, who are you? You've taken this moment in time to operate an entity that affects other people. What have you done with it? For all of us, all of us have to answer two questions all the time. To people you don't know, you have to answer the question, so what do you do? And for people you do know, you have to answer the question, what did you do today? How do you want to answer that question? What's lost, Daniel, is the ability to answer that question in any way that you believe will create some legacy impact. That's the biggest loss a company can suffer.
One of the things that I've been noticing this week, Stan, is technically it's really not this week, so let me back up and correct that. But it's kind of it's what would be a good way of saying it? It's on everyone's attention right now because it's trending in the social space, and I'm talking about what's happening with Applebee's right now and the tension that's being drawn around that brand and the absolute, what I would say, are almost people becoming mean in their comments when I happen to know both sides of this situation, and I'm sitting here going, okay, everybody, have you forgotten there are humans on all sides of this? And how is the attack mode that I'm seeing happen over and over and over again really a solution?
Well, it's not a solution, Michele, but what you're seeing is a manifestation of what we were talking about earlier. People feel small, and that's a very frightening thing. And the natural psychological reaction to fear is anger. That's the natural offensive defensive reaction. And it's not. I'm sure we've all been in circumstances where you have somebody just raging at you, and you just want to say, listen, it wasn't that big of a deal. What is this really all about? And what it's really all about is not a single isolated situation at Applebee's. Nobody would get that cranked up about something like that. It's just, I feel small. I feel that my ability to impact my own life, to live what's most important to me, I don't look at it that much, but when I look at it, it doesn't seem to be in my control. I'm hungry for something that I can never fill. Whatever has gone wrong is apparently, I've been told over and over again, is not my fault. The solutions that are sold to me are all short-term. The trust that I place in people in positions of trust generally doesn't work out. There seem to be morally dyslexic office holders wherever I go. All of that stuff that is combined to keep you in a state where you can be sold anything has a real toxic effect. And what you're seeing is just another example of people being made crazy. I mean, you could say in a personal accountability sense, we've allowed ourselves to be made crazy, but this is what happens when this crazy-making stuff surrounds you. It's something like Applebee's that all of a sudden just drives you insane.
What would you advise if we find ourselves responding like what's happening with Applebee's in any kind of situation? It doesn't have to be with them. What kind of questions can we ask ourselves to allow ourselves not only to kind of pull back, but to be able to take a smarter action forward?
Well, I hate to be trite about this, but we have to get back to where we once belonged. That humanity, first of all, humanity in business, from a business perspective, humanity in business is only undependable if you don't start from humanity in the first place. You leave people alone to do the right thing, they will generally do the right thing. So from a business perspective, if you are drawing that kind of wrath, I think you really have to go back, almost to Daniel's question, to say, well, have we lost our own humanity in the business, and is this the price that we're paying now? And if that's the case, as a human organism in this business with the ability to impact the people who depend in the business, inside and out of it, we need to do some soul searching, and that is about as hardcore a business issue as it can get. It is not soft stuff. If you are on the outside of that and find yourself raging at a particular business, I think it's the same thing. It's a matter of discovery. It's to say, why is this so unsettling to me? Because at the core of anything that has made you angry, at the root, it's frightened you in some way. What is it about this circumstance that is frightening to me? What is it an indicator of? Why am I so easily unnerved and so drawn into this kind of response? And is the community that I'm surrounding myself with an angry community? And do I really want to be part of that? And again, this is not soft stuff. This is the stuff of a deliberate, intentional, healthy life. And so it's the ability to just draw back and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't want to be that nuts about this. Maybe I really am off my game. Hell, maybe I don't even know my game. And if that's the case, this is a bigger issue, and I need to do some work on it.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about who you're surrounding yourself with, because I've noticed over just the past 3 years, I've changed who I choose to spend my time around and how much time I spend around them. Now, some of them people would say are non-negotiable when you're talking about family, and I would kind of disagree on that one.
Yeah.
But the ones that I think are fascinating to watch to me are when people don't recognize those behaviors in who they choose to call friends. And I'm just kind of amazed, again, at why they don't come to the conclusion of maybe I don't need to spend as much time around them as I am, because it's affecting how I show up. It's not nurturing or feeding who I want to be.
Well, again, it's all part of the same lack of awareness that appears when you detach emotionally. First of all, emotional commitment, the key neurobiological source of emotional commitment in a human being is the ability to live your own deepest values in any relationship or environment. I wrote Bury My Heart at Conference Room B because what companies want most from their managers is that emotional commitment. And yet the company is afraid to let them live their own values. So what the company wants most, it most stops itself from getting. But if you're not living your own values and you detach, that detachment is a serious calibration of your presence in the world, and it's not that easy to dial it up and dial it down, and you just find yourself not on your own agenda. And if you're not on your own agenda, you're prey to everybody else's agenda. So, yeah, I think most of us walk around in various states of unawareness, and it seems safe. The origin of detaching seems reasonable, and it just seems so much easier as we're all so busy and so exhausted. It seems so much easier to let somebody handle some of your opinions for you. That's just not the case. It's not the case individually in relationships. It's not the case in an entrepreneurial environment that is so dependent on the discretionary effort of its people inside and outside the business. And the bigger you get in a company, the more vulnerable you are there too. You're betting bigger. There are more people dependent on you. It's harder to touch those people. If you detach and you live in this state of unawareness, it affects everything, every relationship. You can't slice it and dice it.
When you were writing Bury Your Heart in Conference Room B, was there a particular chapter that was more challenging for you personally?
Oh, there were a couple of. The whole thing was a challenge. It's such a complicated concept to make simple. And if you're dealing with a reader who's detached in the first place, you've got to bring them along very carefully. Why you have to respect the state of detachment and still whack away at it. So I think in terms of the audience that I was trying to write to, the biggest challenge was I am writing to an audience that is both managers and management. Managers, and I'm including business owners here, managers are pretty sane and sensible about how they want to live and work and live at work. You take any couple of managers and talk to them about that, and even if they didn't actually say, I'd like to bring the best of what my life gives me to work and be respected, have that respect and protected, they would come pretty close. You put them back into a room with a lot of other managers, and some bizarre herd mentality takes over, and they start legislating against their own best interests because now they're management, the honor guard of the corporate organism. And as management, they believe that it is dangerous to the enterprise to allow managers to live their own values. So there's no the things that managers deplore most about working, including not being able to live my own values on the job. There is no evil brain in a jar behind the curtain. Those conditions were promoted, developed, accepted, and protected by managers acting as management. So part of the difficulty of the job was how do you make both the business case and the personal case at the same time to the reader? And to answer your question, the other most difficult thing for me was I had to put the story, I felt I had to put the story of how I discovered my own values in the book, and I'm a pretty introverted guy, and I just didn't really feel like putting my life story out there for everybody. But I felt if I was asking anybody else to go deep, I mean, what kind of wussy act was that if I didn't do it myself? So I took it in, put it out, took it in, put it out, took it in, put it out. I put it in, finally, and we went to press.
You brought up the topic of introversion, and it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I realized I had misclassified myself, which opened up so much, explained why I felt so uncomfortable and almost at odds with myself. Because we grow up hearing, if you're an outgoing personality, if you can stand up on stage and give a presentation, or if you're willing to be the person who says, come on, everybody, let's go do this, that you're an extrovert. And I was almost relieved to discover that was not the case. It allowed me to start being more conscious of how I fill up my own vessel.
Well, introversion and extroversion are simply a matter of where you get your energy in the world. You either get it from connecting with the world of others, or you get it through some internal process. It doesn't mean you don't like people, although you may not like people. That's a different thing. Extroverts the myth of extroverts is that they are lively and popular and they really like you. They don't really like you. They're just trying to make eye contact so they can suck the energy right out of you like Night of the Living Dead. So there's great stuff for both. I'm in the world of people all the time, and sometimes I feel like there's a great Oscar Wilde quote, because people look at the work that I do, making the business case for humanity, and then how much I prefer to just be left alone. And there's an Oscar Wilde quote that says, "I love mankind. It's people I can't stand." And it's just simply a matter of energy, that's all. Where you get your energy.
Have you noticed when you're inside companies that extroverts tend to kind of make things more difficult for introverts? Sometimes it almost feels like there's a bullying behavior that happens there.
Well, the difference between extroverts and introverts in part is that extroverts speak before they conclude, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to put out a tripwire there to get you to respond so the sucking can begin. And so the extroverts leave meetings and parties and trials saying, "I can't believe I said that," because they haven't really thought about it first. They're looking at it at the same time everybody else is. Introverts, so it makes extroverts seem like idiots. Introverts conclude before they speak. The problem with that is by the time they've figured out what they want to say, the meeting's over, or the trial's over, or the party's over. So they're the ones who leave those circumstances saying, "I can't believe I didn't say that." It makes them seem like idiots. So everybody's an idiot, right? It's just in meetings in particular, extroverts seem to rule, because they're going to drive the energy. They're going to speak without having to be hampered by actually thinking through what they're talking about in some cases. And it doesn't mean, though, that extroverts necessarily rule a business. There are many organizations that are introverted organizations. Apple, as an example, is a very introverted company. They seek their own counsel. They don't partner well. They're very closed and secretive. There are many very successful companies that are introverted companies, and many divisions within particularly large companies that are introverted. And you can be a leader. You can be a leader and be an introvert. A leader has to do with understanding your personal values and turning them into a compelling cause for others. But it's those others that form the movement that is leadership.
One of the stories that you shared in Bury My Heart in Conference Room B that really caught my attention, and I led with it I led with a quote or part of it in the framing post today, was and I don't have the name in front of me, but was the person who was in charge of sales at Microsoft, and he got up and gave...
Yeah, Orlando Ayala. And if you're listening to this, Orlando, how you doing? Yes.
Can you share with listeners a little bit about why that was so powerful and the change that it ended up bringing about? Because when you read it, you're almost kind of like, okay, I get it, because I was led. You did a good job of leading us through the process, of us starting to recognize our own values as we were reading what he did. But even knowing that, when I read it, I was like, oh, my God, that took balls.
Yeah, it did. But, again, Orlando got to it, and for those listeners and readers who haven't read the book yet, it is a story of the guy who was running worldwide sales for Microsoft. And if you look in the Oxford Dictionary of the English Language under the word aggressive, you just see his picture. And it was him and his senior team that we took Bury My Heart at Conference Room B into and did that work. And it was really an epiphany for all of them about how detached they really were. And that's what really promoted what Orlando figured out, which is the whole point of the book as well, is that not only is living your own values the best thing you can do for yourself, it is the best thing you can do for your business. Really, you will never really work for your company until your company really works for you. And so he got that, and he brought that into a very contentious environment to Bill Gates and the 80 top managers of Microsoft, and was supposed to stand up and talk about his plan for world domination, and he stood up and talked about his grandmother and how he discovered his own values, and people just said, what is this, some alien possession? Who are you? But what it did was break through to the entire group there, and it just was an incredible emotional moment for the entire senior team of a major enterprise. And when I interviewed Orlando afterwards, he said, well, what I realized, and I thought I was going to get fired for doing this, you just don't call out the company in any way, even in my position. But what I realized is that the only person who can determine your legacy is you. And I asked him, well, how did it feel to do that? And he said, I felt liberated. Michele, that's the stuff money can't buy. And position power won't get you.
Well, and that's one of the things that I notice every time I'm able to step through fear, to take action, and to start recognizing another piece of myself, how liberating it does feel, but you don't really know that till you're there. And so that part of the inspiration doesn't serve you till you're on the other side of the fence. So how can we communicate to people who are not on the other side of the fence why it is so helpful, why it feels so good, why it delivers a level of fulfillment that's almost it's almost hard to communicate.
It is, and it's highly annoying to people who aren't that fulfilled. But one of the ways that I struggle with that in the book, how do you make the business case for this? Because managers and business owners, and they may get it intellectually. They may even desire what we're talking about. But they serve the business first. That's what it means to be a manager, serve your company first. And when you own a business, you certainly have that responsibility as well. So you have to make the business case for what you're doing first. And there is a definite business case. If you can turn your job into a mechanism for fulfilling your deepest values, then you'll protect the mechanism by making your company successful, even more than you were before. You'll give the one thing, you may be giving intellectual, financial, and physical commitment, but you'll give the one thing that is worth more than all of those combined. And since you can't possibly live your values in business without the support of your people, if they don't know what they are and they don't care, if you can turn your values into the promise of better working conditions for your people, then they'll support you. They'll protect you. Now, how are they going to protect you? Well, tell us what we have to get done in the business. We'll take care of that. You stay right where you are because you are no longer a replaceable commodity. So in terms of making the case to somebody in a business sense, I think there is a definite business case, and that's why I fill the book with case after case, metric after metric, story after story of real managers and real companies who have really done this apparently counterintuitive thing and got the business results that allowed them to say, okay, then I can make the case for practicing my own fulfillment here. But, Michele, if you're going to make the case to somebody outside business, I wouldn't make the case about what is being gained if you do this. I would make the case about what is being lost if you don't. And beyond your own life, the people around you that are important to you, they are depending on you to show up as who you really are. Their memories of you, your impact on them, will be based on how you show up. And you really want to show up as who you are. You really want to think, what for the people that I'm close to, what's the ethical will that I want to leave them? If I had to tell a child 3 things about how to really live their life, what would I want to have echo in their minds and in their hearts? And if you're not locked in on that yourself, well, then you're going to miss that impact on others, and you're going to miss it on yourself. I mean, again, this is it. You don't get these hours back. Hey, this is your life. It is happening to you right now, and you don't get points for working, and you don't get points for whining. You get the ultimate points for doing it right.
Oh, gosh, you've done it again. You've made me speechless when I know I need to keep talking.
I'm sorry. Or just keep talking.
I'm seeing a situation that I'd like to ask a question from you on, and that is, when I notice the ultimate leader in a company wanting to operate from a purely logistical perspective, and they aren't getting why it's important for people to have the emotional fulfillment and their values all lined up in how they're showing up, who they are, what they're producing. You know, I get that part of it, but if the head of the dog is not getting it, I don't think any wagging of the tail is going to do anything. So,
well,
what's your advice for people who, when they're in the position that they're not the head?
Well, first of all, if you're a manager, this problem is going to be snatched. I'm talking about a lower level manager. This problem is going to be snatched away from you by your employee culture, because the culture places the greatest importance on proximity, not position. The CEO of the company, they may have a good day or a bad day, but you're my manager. You know, that's of mild interest to me if the CEO has a good day or a bad day. You're my manager and you have a bad day, that's of wild interest to me. So the employee culture, the people that work for you, will pay the most attention to you, and you can actually cause this to happen. You can begin to get people to protect your values and live in the name of your values, which will allow you to do it. That's what the book is all about at any level. You know, the only dependable thing in your life that's going to happen to you top down is the digging of your grave. But going up, the other part of this is to recognize that you're no more evolved as a human being just because you have an elevated position. And if in a company, if you can use this to tell a new story of performance, you will, first of all, get the attention of people above you. Really, the companies that are most hardcore about performance are the ones that become most maternal and squishy about people who perform. So the company will give you some room to do what you're doing if you can say that what I'm doing is actually having some metrics impact. Again, that's why I had to put that stuff in the book, to show you how to make the business case for it. But I will also tell you, Michele, that the higher up you go, really, when you're clawing your way to the top in your career, you can cling to the illusion that everything will be figured out and fulfilling when you get there. When you get there, you get to that top job, and now you're a culture of one, and you have all the apparent rewards of the job, and things still suck, things still don't make sense, and now you can't admit it. You can't admit what doesn't feel good, and there's no place else to go. People jump from the top floors in buildings, not the bottom. So really, you showing this at any level in an organization, you will be surprised at the impact it will have on people up above in the organization. Wherever they get the lesson, they get the lesson. Our greatest life lessons aren't necessarily from people in positions of teachers and preachers and coaches. They're incidental circumstances, people that don't even know they had the impact on us that they did. And I would say, so first of all, turn it into business results, make the case, get the room to move, talk about how you did what you did, and you will begin to get attention from others who may not buy it as anything other than a new way of getting business results at first. But this is such a big issue for anyone who calls himself a human being that they'll buy it sooner or later.
Dane has a question for us on Twitter, Stan. He wants to know, how do you coach someone to be present to others?
Oh, my God. I think that's a great question, Dane, and I think it really does come down to this idea of picking a couple of the values that are most important to you. When we start, and in the book, the first of many tools that I put in the book is a simple values reduction exercise. Let's start with 50 basic common human values. And let's get down to the few that if you had to make a choice, it's an artificial choice, you know, more than 3 things are important to you, that you would really say that these are my choices. This is what is most important to me. Once you've got that, why? I mean, if you said those are most important to you, there has to be a reason. What are the moments of truth in your life that would cause you to say, out of an entire potentially infinite list of choices, these are the words that describe my very own source, as I said earlier, of safety, hope, and renewal. Whether I'm living them or not, these resonate strongly. What happened? Did you have some deprivation incident? Did you have an experience of learning this life lesson? And what is it that they give you that makes them so important to you in your life? I move beyond, like if we're talking about family and integrity, move beyond the literal dictionary definitions of those words. What do those concepts give you that make them so important in your life? Once you begin to get this awareness, Dane, the concept of not living them in a place you're spending over half your waking hours becomes untenable.
Well, Stan, we have gotten really, really close to the time that we said we would spend with you today, and there's a question that I ask every guest who comes on Breakthrough Business Strategies Radio. As a matter of fact, it's Lou's favorite, and she's already tweeting asking us, don't forget to ask.
Okay.
It's what I call my brain download question. If you had the opportunity to have what I call a brain download, and I give a little bit of an example of what Spock used to do with the mind meld, but it's a tiny bit different. If you're able to understand through this brain download how people made their choices and their decisions and how it made who they were in their life. So if you could have a brain download like that with anyone, whether it's someone from the past, someone from the present, maybe even someone from the future, who would Stan Slapp like to have a brain download from and why?
Wow. God, that is a great question. Because my own cultural icons, a lot of them are musicians, so they're all dead heroin addicts, and they probably have nothing to say on an intellectual basis. I think that more than the despots throughout history, I'd want to look at the simple people who created movements around them. Because when we look at iconic leaders in history now, by the time we see them, they come to our attention, they've already made it. They've already vanquished their foes, and they're delivering flawless rhetoric to dewy-eyed masses. We don't see them when they first started, when they didn't have a hope of succeeding against an enemy that was dug in, well-resourced, and unwilling to cede any territory. And they didn't have any followers. They didn't have any speeches. They didn't have any platform. They just knew who they were, and they knew that there was a better way to live. And I would love to talk to some of those people throughout history to say, why was doing this the only option for you, and how did you do it?
That's pretty good on its own.
Okay.
That's an answer I have not gotten. I'm enjoying it over here. You know, before we came on air today, Stan, I had already received 1,571 tweets just on the blog post and 27 private messages of people asking questions, which I did my best to kind of formulate, you know, what they were wanting to know in the time that we had today. I'm curious. You sound like you're excellent at finding value wherever you go. And I'm going to be really, really bold. And I'm going to ask you, what value did you find in our interview today, and what would you tell other authors or experts who are looking to gain attention of a great niche audience of decision makers like Breakthrough Business Strategies Radio?
Well, what I've found is I've done a lot of interviews around the book, and what was noticeably different about the interview itself and the vibe you set and the questions that came through from your listeners was you didn't want to talk about the book, you wanted to talk about what the book meant. And you didn't want to just talk about business, you didn't want to just talk about humanity, you wanted to talk about how those integrate because they have to. And that is the purpose of my work as well. I would recommend this unhesitatingly.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Dan. You know, I know your schedule's really busy, and we want to thank you for the fact that you were willing to share time with us today and help us to learn why it's so important for us to really be aligned to our core values and how it can serve not just us as individuals or our businesses, but how it can serve us as a world of people.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be able to do it. And I would say to anybody who's listening out there, whether you are in the position of a manager, you actually have head count, or you are managing a family, or you are part of a community, whatever your role is, be human first, a manager second.
Thank you so much, Stan. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Take care.
What I would advise you guys, if you would allow me to give you advice, that is, please make sure that you do go to today's radio show framing post and reach out to Stan. Tell him something that really grabbed you from what we talked about today. Because, you know, he shared with us ways to connect with him on Twitter, LinkedIn, his own blog and his own website. You can leave comments there as well. And I would ask those of you who end up being winners of a copy of Bury My Heart in Conference Room B, go leave him a really great review after you've read the book on Amazon. I wasn't kidding when I said, here we go. You know, it is time for our featured guest, and I want to share a little bit about Stan Slapp. He came to my attention for the first time because of his keynote at New Media Expo, or Blog World, as most of you remember it before its name change. And Stan, man, what he is doing is, frankly, one of the goals I have for my own business and brand. He has an international consulting company that uses what I would describe as very provocative techniques that serve as brain pattern interrupts. You know, we talk about that a lot here on Breakthrough Business Strategies Radio. And then it gives you powerful ways to deliver what it looks like to be very revolutionary, improved performances with large groups of people. That is not an easy thing to accomplish. Stan's been able to